What's up everyone, it's StrangeLuv here, and for this video we're going to take a trip back to my Rare Character Showcase series. Now for this episode we're taking a closer look at two very special Toxic variants, the Toxic Citron for the plants and Toxic Brainz for the zombies. It has taken me a very long time and a zillion sticker packs to finally get these characters, so I'm excited to finally give you my impressions of both of these characters in this showcase. Alright, so let's start off by taking a closer look at the Toxic Citron. Now the Toxic Citron's neon green color makes him look a little bit more like a lime, and he's normally covered in a sort of radiation suit with toxic slime oozing out of the back, but I put on this little spiky mohawk and goggle setup to make him look a little bit more edgy, like he's straight out of Mad Max or something, and I think it came out looking pretty good. The Toxic Citron's primary weapon is called the Limer Slimer, once again going along with that whole lime aesthetic, and what makes this weapon unique is that it fires in short bursts rather than a full beam. The Limer Slimer is still fully automatic, meaning that you can hold down the trigger to fire rather than having to pulse it, but it just doesn't fire one long continuous beam like the other Citrons. Now, this is gonna sound kind of weird, but his weapon is kind of juicy, like it makes me thirsty every time I use this character, so who knows, maybe Toxic Citron is the real Juice Master. Just kidding, Owen. Anyway, Toxic Citron, of course, inflicts toxic radiation damage to his enemies, along with a tiny bit of splash damage, which is to be expected considering the juiciness of his weapon animation. Toxic Citron's primary weapon can deal up to about 8 damage with critical hits, along with an extra couple ticks of residual toxic damage. Now the residual damage is usually only about 1 to 2 damage points over about 2 seconds, which I feel is pretty reasonable. Like the other Toxic variants, Toxic Citron also emits a radius of toxic damage to nearby zombies, but you have to be pretty close to enemies for them to be hit with this proximity radiation. Now, most of the Citrons can perform well at a distance, but I think it's better to get up close with the Citron in order to make the most of his area of effect radiation. Plus, the Limer Slimer seems to be a little bit more effective at close to mid-range, as you'll be able to land those critical hits and headshots a lot more often. Alright, now let's go over to the zombie side and take a look at the lovely, heroic Toxic Brainz. Now, Toxic Brainz is a legendary character, and it took me forever to finally get this variant, and it wasn't until the last community challenge where I was able to unlock him in the red legendary chest. Toxic Brainz arrives on the scene in a sort of hazmat radiation suit, which doesn't seem to have done a great job at keeping him safe from radiation sickness, and when I was putting on some other customizations on Toxic Brainz, I thought it was pretty cool how his face and cape are sort of oozing, and it makes whatever face paint or cape design you put on sort of look like it's melting. So my Toxic Brainz came out looking kind of like a melting clay mime with some crazy gold hair, but let me know what your favorite customizations are for Toxic Brainz in the comments below. Now, since he is a Super Brainz variant, Toxic Brainz has two methods for inflicting toxic damage. First, he has his Toxic Fists, which act as his close-range melee weapon, and he has 3 punches that scale up through 10, 20, and 30 damage respectively. His second ability is of course the Toxic Beam, and unlike the Toxic Citron, he actually does have a continuous beam to irradiate plants at a distance. His Toxic Beam can deal up to 4 damage in critical hits at close to mid-range, and the damage is reduced the further away the target is. Now, we can't forget that Toxic Brainz is a legendary character, meaning that he has a special ability bar that fills up over time. Toxic Brainz's special ability is called Toxic Overload, and when the meter is full, he sort of looks like he's going Super Saiyan. He gains a movement speed buff as well as a temporary damage increase until the bar depletes. Now, the damage increase actually triples the damage of both his melee and ranged attacks, so damage from his Toxic Fist will scale between 30, 60, and 90 damage, while his Toxic Beam will go up anywhere between 9 and 12 damage depending on the range. Now, to fill up the Toxic Overload bar, you have to repeatedly punch plants with your Toxic Fists, and the more consecutive hits the better because you'll fill up the bar a lot faster that way, and actually the bar doesn't fill up at all when you use your Toxic Beam, because that would just be way too easy. Now, once the Toxic Overload activates, it will last for about 15 seconds or so, and so you want to rush forward and try to hit as many plants as possible during this time to make the most of your speed and damage bonuses. Overall, I feel that both Toxic Citron and Toxic Brainz are currently pretty well balanced, and they don't feel particularly overpowered, but they are still strong enough to be competitive in the right player's hands. Of course, a lot of this depends on how the developers tweak and tune some of the other characters as well, but for right now, these two Toxic variants seem pretty balanced, and hopefully they stay that way. Alright, you guys, leave a comment down below with your thoughts on Toxic Citron and Toxic Brainz, and let me know what rare character I should showcase next. As always, thanks so much for watching, stay strange my loves, and until next video, this is StrangeLuv signing out.